It is I, Ham. I'm back. This time, Ames is here. Say hi, Ames.
Hi. Hi.
Hi. Alright, yeah. So, I do run a campaign in this system, and Ames is one of my players, and I thought I'd have her on to discuss enemy design as someone who has personally experienced the other end of it. Anything you'd like to say about yourself before we start?
Hi, I'm Ames. I have made Ursus Office, Techniques of the City, as my main contribution to the system. And I am a chronic ego gear addict, and as Ham mentioned, player as Yune, who is represented here by this little yo.
You just have a little creature there. I still can't get over that. So you're just a little creature. Anyways,
Yeah.
let's uh let's discuss like just a tiny bit of context before we begin. All right, we've had some key assumptions on the last video, which covered skill bases. We're gonna discuss at least one more here, which is player side advantage, and this is something that's actually in the main book explicitly defined. Essentially, what it says is the player always gets to see the enemy skill first. Um, so if you're targeting, you see what the enemy's doing, and you can decide which of your skills you want to use as a response. And this is kind of the whole edifice of basically everything that that this system is based on, at least in my mind. And so all the enemy design will be centered around this inherent fact that players get this kind of privilege of being always the one to respond. Any comment on this?
None in particular.
All right. Right. So, would you like to discuss your first skill set?
Yeah, this is the skill set that I made about like a couple months ago when the campaign started. It was not very good. We tested it in a test encounter against the standard like thumb grunt enemies. Aim light broke immediately because of that second skill and could not recover.
Yeah, as mentioned in the skill basis video, massive strikes are they, they, they kind of just leave you light broke. It's really rough. Like if this was a two cost, it would have done much better. Like,
Yeah.
and then we got to like the actual campaign, and while you did like a few edits, we'll cover those later. For now, let's cover the enemies. So for the first act of my campaign, we were an S Corp, and we were dealing with the precursors of the Kurokumo clan, which you might recognize from Runa. And these guys had three relevant passives. Razor Strike meant that if they hit you with Slash Ice, you got Bleed next scene. Blood in the Water is one of the more significant ones. Basically means if you're half HP, they get dice power. And Sadistic Constitution is more a thing for like encounters over time and integrating narrative play with injuries and anxieties into the combat. And while that's a very interesting thing, that isn't really what we're going to be discussing here. We're going to be discussing them in isolation, in combat. But just know that like passives like these are a very good idea to include because they really add a kind of cohesion where what happens narratively carries over to what happens in battle. You can also have different conditions like the enemies getting the drop on the players manifested in stagger damage or HP damage, or even the players getting the drop on the enemies as in like them having safeguard or poise at the start of this scene. Like there's a lot of things you can do here with this, and especially here with sadistic constitution. Ames, you remember earlier, just like you guys just didn't have time to heal your injuries, and you just had to protect the guy that had injuries because the injuries counting as bleed stacks was so bad.
Yeah.
Like,
Because I think another notable thing, but although that will be for later, but it's effectively a passive, is that nearly all of their skills have some form of bleed exploit.
Yeah, here's the skills. Here's what Ames is talking about. Basically, 3 plus bleed is the magic number that turns their skills from manageable, like 4.5 is very beatable, to, oh, yikes, this might be pretty hard, which is a 7.5 on a zero cost. Like,
Yeah.
really don't want to be targeted by them when you have 3 plus bleed. That's like the real center of this. And going back to like blood and water, same theme. You don't want to be targeted when you're below half HP. You don't want to be targeted when you are 3 plus bleed. What this means is players are highly incentivized to protect those who are under either of those conditions, which is done through a mechanism called holding dice, which in the system basically is you, instead of using your dice immediately, you just leave it on the table, and then whenever an enemy uses theirs, you can use yours to intercept. And that kind of play is very excellent for countering this kind of targeting, because the moment you see an enemy trying to target your friend who they'll hit hard against because either they're the bleed or they're below half, you can intercept and their skills will actually roll less against you. And you've seen this firsthand, right? Like, I think the first time you've encountered them, like you learn, like the party learned this lesson the hard way.
Yeah. We like in the first session of combat immediately learned saving die is a very good idea.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, 100%. All right, and to like kind of demonstrate what like this, how this works, cumulus wall is one of the skills of all time, and definitely one of the, I'll say, trickiest ones to deal with. So I think the first strategy that lots of people think of when they go to this system is, oh, you know what I should do? I should just like do a big attack, like do a big die, do lots of die, and just unga bunga the enemies. And Cumulus Wall is very much a very anti unga bunga type move. Because this one tag, Clash, Lose, Inflict 2 Bleed next turn, it doesn't look like a lot. But in context, if you beat this with just say like a massive strike, or like if you want to look at Yune's skill list is going to be part the crowd, clouds, weather the rain. You beat it, amazing. You do like a good amount of damage. Let's just say you deal like 11 damage, but you have 2 bleed next scene on you. And then let's just say this Pierce hits you. That's 3 bleed next scene. That already does the conditionals, and now all of a sudden you're looking down the barrel of like an 8.5 average on a 1 cost on all of the enemies, and they are going to all target you. Any thoughts on this? I know you and everyone else in my campaign has ample experience of dealing with Cumulus Wall.
Yeah, Cumulus Wall is like the main thing that makes the Kurakumo in this like specific grouping that Ham has set up work. Like it is the skill that they that they will use on the first if you aren't playing to like go against it, because it is just complete like easy setup for them to get their conditional. It is like the skill.
And to mention, like, there are ways around it. You can have like a block and hit with a really weak block in front, and then you beat the second die, and that very cleanly answers it at the cost of some stagger damage, right? You can let it one side actually, as a matter of fact. You can just let the 1d4 and 1 bleed hit you, and just not hit that person, and never proc the block die, which is something I don't think anyone in the campaign ever used, but if I was up against this enemy, I would definitely consider. Um,
Yeah, I just don't think that we ever had the chance to once we figured that could be an option to actually put it into play because we were trying to do other strategies.
Oh yeah, 100%. And also, I think what happened was earlier in the campaign, everyone was pretty big on targeting instead of in some situations. And so if you target against Cumulus Wall, you're forced to use a skill because you have declared I wear clashing right now. So that's another situation where it's just very, very rough. You just want to hold here. Yeah, and we're just gonna like quickly like run through like a kind of example to just demonstrate like how this thing works and how these enemies really teach the players to play better through punishing inefficient play. So here we go. Or rather, not inefficient play, but over aggressive play. The whole design of the enemies, if we're going back to this, giving protection to their allies, having greater attack when targeting certain people, it is designed to teach the players who you should not target. If someone has 10 protection, you deal 10 less damage to them. Like, there's no way that any substantial damage is going through 10 protection. You should just hit someone else. That's what this portion of the kit is really about. The protection to allies is they stack protection on one guy. You don't want to hit that guy. You hit another guy. This is teaching how you want to target your own damage. And then the fact that they have dice power up on certain people that you can see very clearly, that's to teach when you need to protect someone, you need to protect them. It's to teach targeting and also to teach when to block for your friends. Any real comment on this? Like,
Yeah, we have had numerous situations where our goal was not to try and like beat down the enemies as fast as possible. It was to protect our squishies so that they could survive.
yeah, 100%. Like, and I think that ultimately is a much more interesting mode of play because it's more interactive than just vomiting damage onto the enemy. Like it's more slow and deliberate. Anyways, so in this example, let's just say someone this guy Finn uses a strong single strike against this guy. Responds with Cumulus Wall. It does a lot of stagger damage. It does some HP damage, and then the guy gets hit back. This guy uses a multi-die skill. Gets Cumulus Wall. Oh no, but like this guy low rolled on both of the dice of Cumulus Wall, and so he's staggered. And then same thing happens here, but the result is modestly more favorable because the second die wins, and we have this situation right here. So in this situation, a lot of parties, what they would say is, "Oh, you see this guy that's staggered? We should just kill this guy now and worry about it later." This is in fact a very bad idea. So this is what this situation could possibly look like the next scene. So because these guys beat the Cumulus Wall, this guy has 3 bleed. This guy's 2 bleed from the Cumulus Wall. And so if we're going by the relatively greedy strategy, and I think a common one for lots of groups is we're going to kill this guy. That is great. But the end result is they both use Sky Clearing Cut, which is the 2-die skill that has bleeding exploit. And this might kill, and it at least staggers Finn. And now look at this out, right? Because Finn has 5 bleed. That's 5 damage on scene end because the guy got beat down by these guys. Yes, you may have like staggered this person, even killed them, but now what? Now, let's just say these guys continue to be greedy. Yeah, we want to kill this guy because if he's gonna get unstaggered next turn, he's gonna get his action back. So kill the guy, right? All right, first attack goes towards this guy. He can't intercept for himself because he's dead, and she can't intercept because it's not her speed eye yet. And this attack goes towards this guy, and then finally she intercepts, and that staggers. And this looks favorable, right? You just likely this guy's gonna die next scene. This guy's dead, but it's very likely that Finn just passes away from bleed, like he is knocked out in combat. Of course, a small side. Dying in combat, as in like reaching 0 HP, does not have to be narrative death of the character. But also, in general, player characters are more valuable than NPCs in a lot of cases. Like, because there's only really a few player characters, and the way that I run the crew Kumo is they are a large syndicate, which means they can afford to throw numbers. Which means, in my specific campaign settings, the player cannot afford to trade 2 to 1 on player characters versus enemies, because if they did that, they would eventually lose. And again, you see like all these like in isolation, like from a more greedy angle, seem like good decisions. However, like with the context of how the Kurokoma work and the conditionals, this all of a sudden is absolutely disastrous. You traded like one PC's life for an enemy and then damaging another enemy and staggering them. Like, any comment on this? Does this seem like modestly familiar there?
It is like very much like a thinking like logistically about things. Like your characters in the moment would not be like, "Oh yeah, let's just like sacrifice this one guy because it's easy for us to get 2 kills on people that we barely know and don't have any significance." And also just like thinking instead of like going for an all-in sort of strategy to kill one guy, you should try and be preservative somewhat to like try and make sure that you guys are able to survive on your own and be able to fend off attacks that would be coming towards you. Try thinking strategically instead of thinking with your sword effectively.
Yeah, all right. Exactly. Like, and very much so, like, I will say that, like, the kind of, like, all-in play style is something that I find a lot of people, like, gravitate towards. It's like, oh, I want to, do flashes and things. I want to kill the enemies. But if we're talking about harder encounters, like the Kurokumo, that are designed to, like, teach these concepts, it's it's going to be very rough. And also, like, encounters like these are the way you, like, really take advantage of the full format of SOTC, which is all about seeing how different skills and dice interact, and push it past just being a damage race of whose numbers are bigger. Like for like the difficulty in facing the Kurokumo doesn't come from their big numbers. It comes from the fact that they can exploit weaknesses, and very much against them, your job is to not have any. Um, yeah, let's discuss your skill list. This one, I think.
Yeah. This skill list was made like a bit after our first few bouts with the Kurikumo, and you can see like a lot of changes almost immediately. Like that 3 cost skill is just gone and replaced with a thing that allows you to gain more light. As well, the build itself, as I didn't explain before, is sort of just like last push, like getting multiple speed die into a big combo. So the main skill that I want to spam a lot, Silent Miss, has been edited to include a block die instead of just being like a 3 hit, like instead of being like a unopposed like 3 hit thing.
Mm.
As well, stem bleeding has been made a lot more defensive because I was trying to go for a more defensive bent after getting like one tapped repeatedly.
Yeah, which is very good. Um, yeah, and what was your cumulus wall answer here?
I believe it was usually just like Focus Strike or Silent Mist because I wasn't at this point. I unfortunately wasn't really thinking about like countering things fully. It was mostly about like just making my combo and like and my
Yeah,
strategy better rather than trying to counter enemy strategy.
yeah. I mean, I will say that also, like, when talking about um kits, one of the weaknesses of this kit is it doesn't really have a super strong second eye focus skill. Like,
Yeah.
and like if you look at this, the power is largely distributed to like the first and third dice in this case, except for stem bleeding, um which has heroic.
Heroic on it.
But this like the problem with this is it doesn't stably lose to cumulus wall, and so this still, if I recall correctly, this still struggled a tiny bit versus the Kurukumo just because like you still didn't have a good cumulus wall answer at this point.
Yeah, I didn't have like a good setup to actually like counter the enemy strategy, but my own strategy was like developing a little bit more.
Yeah, and I will say that like you're not just countering the cumulus wall when you're doing this kind of thing. You're countering things with strong second dice that have a leading block dice. You're countering blocking like a strong single die because you can absorb it with a small block, and you hit back stronger. Like, yes, it counters Cumulus Wall, but skills that are designed to deal with Cumulus Wall deal with lots of other skills well if they're well designed. 100%. Like,
Yeah,
that's.
like later on, I definitely like picked a lot of I forget what it is, but it's the first defensive die and then offensive die one cost. I use that a lot more along with stuff like delayed strike in the future.
Well, very much so. And it's just such a good base. Like, as mentioned inside the skill bases video, like, it is just amazing. Like, Focus Strike, yeah, great stuff.
Yeah. If only it
Alright.
wasn't my thing that I'd use last after I've exhausted all my skills.
And then when people adjusted to the Cumulus Wall, I threw these guys at them. So Hidden Dragons, these guys were kind of fucked up. You mind telling the story of the first time you guys
uh,
fought these guys?
so we were just fighting a few little Kurkuma goons, and then suddenly, when we attacked one that we hadn't attacked for like the entire fight, I think this was like around turn 2 or so. They revealed themselves to be a attack weight having, bleed spreading, truth nuking group of individuals on the first turn.
Yeah. So the first skill that was revealed was Circular Cut Cleaves Cliffs. And from an enemy design's perspective, this is very interesting because it's attack weight with a caveat. Now, attack weight is always like such a, I wouldn't say touchy, but like delicate subject to approaching this system because attack weight, you are cloning your skill. And really, the main thing about attack weight is how do I make attack weight work either by anticipating for it in the design by giving them less speed dice because attack and skill with weight 2 is effective you're splitting your speed dice in 2 for free. That's one huge thing. Another thing is like who do you give it to? Because you want it to be like climactic, you want it to be like significant. So in this case, these hidden dragons narratively were the students of an assassin named Alien, and she was very much present, I'd say, as one of like the stronger characters that have met the player characters.
Yeah, they're like one of the big threats that we've had to encounter numerous
I
times.
wouldn't say like threats. She never actually
Yeah,
did
she's
anything
kind of
to you
just
guys.
aura farms, honestly.
She was chilling there. Like anyways.
Yeah.
But anyways, so circular cost cut cleaves cliffs. An interesting note of this is attack weight in this system, by rules as written, if you target them and they respond, the attack weight does not go off. And so the way I wrote circular cut cleaves clips, it has 2 modes on it. When it's responding, it gets the full dice power, which, to be honest, is mildly terrifying because over here I've marked inside this parentheses the conditionals for the main target, and then in these parentheses is what if there's attack weight. So if there's only one target, the first thing one's a 12.5, taking into account EI, and the second one's a 9.5, and that's 22 sum on 2 costs, which is really terrifying. With attack weight, it's modestly better. It's a 10.5 into 7.5 and 8.5 into 2.5. And that's 18 and 11. You can particularly the off target use of this, you are dealing with 8.5 average on the first die, 2.5 average on the second die. This is so answerable with a singular strike. And in fact, even like the more terrifying version of this, the version that only has one target, this still is very answerable. 1d8 plus 8 is answerable by a 2-cost singular strike, which gets a 1d12 plus 6, and assuming that you have some kind of random check on it, it's going to be 1d12 plus 9, which is favored against this. And this is like one of the elite enemies. These aren't going to get spammed at you. So this does have answers. However, the fact it has attack weight is very significant because the way that these hidden dragons use circular cut cleaves cliffs aggressively is the first target is going to be usually someone that can fight back, someone with a speed die. But the second target is going to be someone that has used their speed die already. And if the party does not have a safe speed die to intercept, this just hits one-sidedly, which if I recall correctly, was mildly terrifying.
Yeah, this was very terrifying. Even just seeing attack weight this early.
Yeah, but you guys adjust to it fairly fast, I'll say.
Yeah.
And the other thing to note is this is very much the opposite of Cumulus Ball in the sense that the answer to it is the polar opposite. Big first single die is what Cumulus Wall wants, and very much is a very strong skill normally, but Cumulus Wall means it's pretty bad. Circular Cut cleaves cliffs, and all of these, because they have the EI passive, demand strong single dice in front. And some people might think, oh, the first reaction, oh, this is unfair, right? You're teaching your players to like do one thing, and and then you're telling them, oh wait, the thing that you're doing doesn't work anymore. The thing is, again, player side advantage. You have 4 skills at level 1. You only get more as you level up. You need to use those skill slots effectively. You only really need one block and hit with a small block and a large hit, or even just a modest hit to answer the hidden dragon's cumulus wall. And if you get one single skill that is one big hit, like I recommend Strong Strike, it answers Circular Cut, Cleave Skips, and you have both of them in your kit, and you see what they're doing first, and then you respond. Like, it is not unfair because the players have overwhelming player side advantage, and this is the foundation of nearly all my enemy design. It is assuming that the players have the intelligence and the information they need to know how to answer enemy skills, and it's testing number one, do they understand what is the best thing to use here? And number two, did they think long enough in advance to have that answer prepared? Any comment here?
Yeah, a lot of Ham's like GMing is to, in combat at least, is to show us the enemy like stats and their skills beforehand, and then we get into it. If and they only really hide something unless if it's like the actual hidden dragon, where that's the gimmick, that's the point.
Yeah, and
Which I'm not sure is like the case for a lot of people, but I like to also show my things before the combat truly begins.
well, yeah, because my philosophy regarding that is kind of fair play. Like in the game Library of Ruina and Limbus Company, both of those you do get to see most enemies before they fight you, and you get to prepare in advance. And I very often show the enemies at the start of session or even before session. And it's this kind of thing where I have enough trust in my enemy design that they're going to be hard enough as is because they provide an actually interesting and thoughtful challenge. And it doesn't have to rely on the element of surprise. Like my enemies can stand up on their own, just purely on their own merit. That's just kind of my philosophy regarding GMing and enemies, at least combat design. Thoughts on that?
Nope, no further thoughts.
All right, yeah. And again, like these other ones are more or less in the same vein. Dual Draggers dig deep. Okay, this one is likely the most messed up one on this list. It is just the more speed dice, and so it is force damage, is what this is. Essentially, if they use dual daggers dig deep, which I only had one enemy use because this is the strongest one, that guy is going to go up there and shank the player character who is the weakest 2 times unopposed. And then that's another test of, okay, has the player's play up to this point been good enough to keep everyone at a healthy HP level so that this does not down a player? And then Sunrise is just a big singular die. This one you want a blocking hit against 100%. So the thing that works against Humulus Wall works against this one. And again, it's like, okay, so this one is testing, okay, how good is your Humulus Wall answer? Circular Cut Cleave Clips. Do you have a strong single dice? Or do you have some other way of dealing with this? Because that's not the only way you can deal with this. You can block and hit this as well. It's just a bit rougher. Dual daggers dig deep is how well have you protected your friends? Who's the weakest link? Can you protect them? Yeah. That's the hidden dragons. All right, new skill list. Look at this one.
This was after fighting the hidden dragons for a small time. One of the more notable changes is that my mixed defense skill I had all the way to the right is now a heavy guard. So I used that one a lot, and it very much helped out in a lot of the fights because it not only has HP ampule, but it's also just a really, really big block die. And you
It,
also now notice that there's stuff like Stratus Sweep, which is just a very strong block and hit.
yeah, I will say, big block die is great. The harder the enemies, the more often you just might have to press an oh shit button to survive, and this is like peak oh shit button to survive. Like, and also Stratus Sweep is a pretty good answer to Cumulus Wall. The first die is still like a bit strong for that. However, the fact that you're exchanging like a 1d10 plus 2 is pretty good because the second die isn't hitting you and you're hitting them back very, very hard.
Yeah, it's like a cost benefit analysis. Like, how can you beat back the pierce die of the Cumulus Wall with something better than their skill?
Yeah. Though I will say that like what you could do here is you just nix the potential stronger, allocate the modules somewhere else, and then like even though this is like a bit weaker, you're still fine here. Like I think a 1d6 plus 2 doesn't reduce that much less, and then you have a better matchup in the Cumulus Wall, and also guarantee. Yeah. The other thing is maybe you just you could in theory put the swap out potential and or stronger with comeback, which basically guarantees clash win or lose that this gets boosted by +2.
Or even preventative measures, honestly.
You know, preventive measures
Like,
is great.
having safeguard in against these guys is just like a good thing. Like, because if they can't bleed you, they can't bleed you.
Yeah, no, 100%. Like safeguard is a very huge answer to the Kurokumo. If they have conditionals, just don't let them get the conditionals.
Yeah,
Yeah, so this is like much better. Like, and you see how like really like it's evolving over time as the enemies are forcing these evolutions. Anyways,
yeah.
and now we get to the most recent arc where there's open wing war, and oh look, I forgot to put the cost here. Suddenly loses a cost too. Anyways, so there is current open wing war, and that means the Kurokumo have learned basic formation fighting. So they get two skills. One, dark side formation. This one just doesn't target. They just stand there and they give their friends protection. And then Sun Deluge, which is a 2 cost that I forgot to put this thing here for, is a singular strike, 1d10 plus 6 with +3 if there is at 4 plus protection. So if the enemies dark side formation twice, 2 people can Sun Deluge at 1d10 plus 9. Note how this is less than the player numbers because this pattern especially is pretty rough because strong strikes really do force a kind of slightly unfavorable answer where if you have to block and hit, you're still getting hit. And so I made it both eminently beatable because some of the players don't have super good blocking hits at this point, and I didn't want to make it too rough on them. And also, if you beat it, they get 3 fragile this scene and next, which is very huge because number one, that cancels out with protection and means that they can't do the Sun Deluge again. And number two, it just means you do lots and lots of damage to them if you hit them. And so this again, this strategy is like Dark Side Formation, Sun Deluge, high risk, high reward. But even so, like 1d10 plus 9 is terrifying to face down. Like, any thoughts on this? Because I know that you have faced this recently.
Yeah. This was very like scary to see, especially sudden deluge, and also just like them having so much like protection and block die. Because this is where the whole like protection gimmick of the Kurakumo started really coming into play. Because it like had an actual end game to it, and we got like hit very hard by the first sudden deluge. but I believe that we did try and like focus more around preventing protection stacking and trying to get rid of people who were trying to do that.
Yeah, 100%. I think you guys caught on later as to strategy. So the normal thing is if you have fought the critical before and default to old strategies, is you want to hold your dice, right? And so they're going to dark sky formation over here. You intercept with a strong strike. You do some damage. It deals protection. If you still wait and see here, this happens. And then they get to fire off enhanced sudden deluge, which likely is going to deal large amounts of damage to someone. I recall during like at least the first round of combat, like maybe during the second, this happened because
Yeah.
what was happening was everyone was targeting, but they weren't targeting the person with the protection. So you let them get up to 4 protection, and you had to eat, I think, 2 sudden deluges round 1,
Yeah.
and that was very very rough. Another like small note, like in a similar vein to like the example with Cumulus Wall, mistakes in combat compound. Your first 2 rounds are extremely critical to deciding how the rest of combat goes. Like if I recall correctly, in this combat, when I introduced the enemies with Dark Sky Formation and Sun Deluge, you guys spent the rest of the 7 rounds of combat out of the 9 climbing out of the pit that you dug yourself into the first 2 rounds. Like,
Yeah, I specifically went down in this as a thing.
yeah, no, it was very rough because the thing about combat in this system is it's very swingy, advantages compound, and so how you play those first 2 rounds and how much thought you put into it and how much you're able to see ahead is very important, just from a player's perspective. And from a GM perspective, it's very much the reason I'm showing all the enemies early is because if I want to run these more challenging encounters, the first 2 rounds are so critical. And if I don't show it to the players in advance, they do not get adequate time to plan around it. And they don't get a fair chance to win. Yeah, I mean that. So, how should you deal with them? And this is what I think the players realize later. So, upon realizing that, oh, this guy has protection, the players target that guy proactively. So, he has 2 options now. Number 1, he uses Dark Sky Formation, and then he empowers one guy over here. Or he uses Sudden Deluge and then possibly loses. And so then Dark Side Formation happens over here, and maybe a 4th person gets it off, but you still at least denied 1 Sudden Deluge. This is like the way you want to fight against these guys. You want to target them down when they're at 2 protection. And again, like we're talking about like strategy and tough enemies. These enemies are not hard because the super huge numbers. They are not hard because like any particular bullshit reason. They're hard because they have a plan, and you have to understand how the plan works and disrupt it. All right. Yeah. Skill lists.
Yep, this is the skill list as it currently is on my character sheet, and you can see like a lot of like the previously discussed things, like a lot of big blocking hits and some like more ways to capitalize on it, and even like a big singular die as well with EI Spark Slash.
Yeah. Don't worry about like the whole like block thing.
Yeah, that's homebrew stuff. A
That's
lot
homebrew.
of this has been adding homebrew throughout the whole thing, but we've they're mostly just simple stuff that have been added to this just to make things a bit different.
Yeah. Like and focus strike. I think again is like we see here. Finally, just a very good cumulus wall answer and block and hit. Like this is very incredibly module efficient. I think this uses only I think 3 rank 1s and then 2 rank
Yeah,
2s.
it uses the battle ability of Lost and Found to add like a second rank 2 module to it.
Yeah, which at this point in time is still very broken, but we're not going to discuss that right now.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is so module efficient, and it just gets the job done, and it's also light neutral. It's just like very huge. This is a very good skill. Like, this is so like, I don't know. This is literally how I would build this. Like, this is in mind a perfect skill. Like, and I'd like to take at least like some credit for like keep on like to keep on like throwing hard enemies at my players. That forces them to grow in this way. Like,
Yeah, because it makes you learn things that you wouldn't necessarily consider initially in order to apply them to your skill set to try and counter it.
yeah, exactly. And this is again just a great skill in general. Like, this is good into large single dice as well. Like, yeah. And then we have large single dice. The relevant thing here is this could potentially be a 1d10 plus 11, which is great. Yeah. And just
But I can use it like at any time after first turn because of how it works. But yeah.
yeah. And real quick, I will touch very briefly on one of my skill sets for another campaign that also is somewhat relevant here. This is just a very good economical skill set. You're gonna notice there's both a massive strike and strong strike here. That is purely because sometimes that GM throws like 20 rolls at us, and I need in that campaign to be able to deal with 20 rolls consistently, so that's what Mass Strike here is for. Step and Strike over here very likely is going to be my Cumulus Wall answer, because just evade and hit, this is good. On average, this ties with the block dice, which again, like, it's not a clash lose, but that's alright, because this is mostly geared towards dealing with more offensive die focus kits, because that's what that GM is usually running. Again, we're seeing here like your skill set, what's good. It's going to depend on GMs. It's going to depend on enemies, but it's the same principles about just you have to adapt your skill sets to what the enemies are running. The enemies can only run so few things. Like, for instance, I'm pretty sure this skill set right here will do good in the campaign that this skill set is in, purely because it has an answer to most things. It's discussed inside the previous video how the player skills only really have a few shapes, and it is also true here. Like, if we're doing skill base type categorization, this is a singular strike. This is a nullification because on Clash Lose it treats as a block dice, and it's not too huge, and so it's not forcing. This is forcing. This is multi-die, but also behaves more like a single strike because the first one is really big. This is a block and hit. The dynamics of skill interaction in terms of dice and how different skills counter each other are fundamental constants of the system. And there's ways to push these designs that I might go into in a future video. But overall, for most normal enemies, and this is how it should be, most starting enemies in most campaigns, they do not push these designs. They stay within the bounds because ultimately, from my perspective, the first few enemies are designed to get all your players up to like the same level system-wise, and that way, once everyone has a baseline, that's when you can start really exploring more interesting designs, which I will maybe discuss in a later video if there's interest. Any closing comments?
None so far. Also, I did just briefly disconnect, but that's not really a worry.
Yeah, all right, yeah. Well, I mean, thanks for coming on. Thanks for providing perspective and also confirming that I am a real GM that runs a real campaign, you know?
Yeah. Ham is real. They're not like a hallucination that you're experiencing right now. I am though.
Don't make me turn the ghost filter on you.
Spooky ghost Ames.
Don't make me do it. Don't make me turn you into a ghost.
Dorothy Yune appears.
This is still kind of horrifying. Anyways, yeah. All right, thanks for watching, guys. Yeah, I think we'll close it here.